Kerfuffle are proud to present Julian O'Dell, a man with a plan.
Hello everybody and welcome here today. I am tremendously excited to a exclusive of Kerfuffle here. We have done it, haven't we, Julian? The two most sartorially brilliant dressed people in the industry have finally made the magic happen. The Thriller in Manila. Here we are. Look at this. Absolutely perfect. With your own catchphrase in the very top hand corner. Marvellous. Mr.
Absolutely.
Julian O'Dell, welcome here to the Kerfuffle platform. How the devil are you, sir?
Thank you for having me, Mr. Whale. You're looking pretty in pink as always. I thought I'd try and blend in. So yeah, I'm good. I'm very, very good. Bunkered down at home as I have been now for 10 months.
I'm broadcasting here today from Newcastle, as you can see. So
I can see you've got your patio doors open. Yeah, very nice too. I'm any human interaction with anyone other than my wife is very welcome. So yeah, good to see you. Good to see you.
Excellent. Well, I couldn't be happier. Obviously, we've known each other many years since you shamelessly beat me to a Supplier of the Year at Sunday Times, and
Yeah.
I've never stopped going on about it.
It's on the wall, literally just over there. I can see it. I nearly hung it behind me. I thought that might upset you.
I'll never forget the day there, Julian. There, Peter Fenwick. We got a bronze, silver. This is ours, Peter. This is ours. Get your jacket on. Julian O'Dell and TM. Anyway, well, look, if you can't beat them, join them, aren't you? And as I said, we're really couldn't be any more pleased, Julian, to be teaming up with you.
Likewise.
One of the real things I think we both have a commitment, obviously, to training and development, and you practiced and preached it, whereas I just kind of bullshit my way through a little bit. But the thing that I find a little bit frustrating in this industry is that there's a lot of people that talk the talk, isn't there? And we've spoke about this endlessly about how important training is and training and development and everything else, and simply. The actions don't match the words, do they? A lot of the time, and we have looked at the reasons why that happens. And actually, things like we're in the middle of lockdown. These are lockdown lessons we're looking at today. And at the very time, often you actually need to have your staff at the very best, pivoting with a new marketplace. Often that's the time when, really frustratingly, people drop the training budget and everything else. And I know you and I have had long conversations about this, and we've. Again, I suppose one of the ways we've had to innovate, as you mentioned, you've been doing this now digitally and via Zoom as we're doing now, is that, look, whatever way you used to look at it in the past, getting together in offices is a big commitment of time. It's, it can be expensive as well, just to get people out of the office and to travel and all the other things, other than your very worthy fee as well in terms of there. And actually, what we're trying to do today, as many people are, I think, is give people more access in a bit of a Netflixy style, aren't we, Julian? To make it more accessible when they need it, on whatever device they need it, and dealing with the issues of the day in a really topical and updated fashion.
Yeah, that's spot on, and I think it's really interesting when you back in the day, I used to go to many conferences as you did yourself, and it was interesting the sort of plethora of stalls. It was all about, it seemed to be all about tech and gadgetry and software and, all that sort of hard sort of stuff, and very little about skill development. And I think it's quite interesting that a number of companies that I've interacted with in the property world are guilty of huge investments in the tech side of things, but which obviously is essential and creates opportunities, but then they don't train the staff to handle those opportunities and turn them into business. And I think it's there's a famous quote by a guy called Will Rogers who said, if companies spent the same amount of money on improving their services as they did on advertising them, then they wouldn't have to advertise them. And I think that's a really interesting quote, because my experience as a grumpy old man these days, whether it be remotely or in person, is the service I receive in all sorts of sectors is disappointing and not what I would expect. But the interesting thing is, those companies involved have spent huge amounts of money hooking me in the first place, and then the actual experience, because of the human beings that interact with me, is substandard. So I won't go back, and I think unfortunately there's a lot of that in estate agency. So yeah, we've I'm not sure I like the word pivot. I think I'm a bit old for pivoting. I put me back out if I do too much of that. But yeah, we're now delivering high quality training via Zoom predominantly, and it's going down fantastically well. I have to say, it's more flexible, it's cheaper, because people, as you rightly say, haven't got to hire conference rooms, that staff haven't got to drive or get trains to places, and a lot of it they can record and re-watch or watch for the first time at a time that suits them. And of course, you know, as we may mention at some point, we've worked together with Kerfuffle to start to create a library of resources that that I think are going to will tick a lot of boxes on the training side of things.
Yeah, very exciting. And the main one, of course, Julian, it's not just the chosen few who are sent along to the training session. Everyone in the business can consume this training, can't they, as well, which is fantastic. So that's really good. Yeah, I think it's really good. I think absolutely what you say there. You know, people do judge, and it's not just judging against competitor agents, is it? Actually, you're being judged a bit against customer service just in general out there. So if somebody in a different sector is actually delivering something well, and you let that down just by not answering the phone or not dealing with it in a sprightly fashion, then that's an issue. And I think the key thing for me is it's almost like there's no second chances these days, isn't there? You know, you really need to take that, seize that moment, deal with it there and then, because otherwise they're just not coming back.
Well, you know, one of the again, cliches are cliches for a reason. They're cliches because they've been around and stood the test of time. And one of the classic training cliches is you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Everyone will have heard that before. That's nothing new, but it's true. And the bottom line is, if you don't deal with somebody in the right way, and you know, let's talk about the real nuts and bolts of estate agency. Stock is where it begins and ends, and it's all very well attracting inquiries, etc. But if I played you some of the calls that we've been hearing over the last 12 months in lockdown and out of lockdown, where customers have been dealt with in such a haphazard, shoddy fashion. I mean, the classics are things like you know, fee inquiries, for example, a potential vendor phoning in saying how much you charge for selling. Well, a great agent will turn that into a valuation. In fact, a great agent will turn that into a valuation where perhaps they're the only agent to be called out because they handle that fee inquiry in such a brilliant fashion. But if I played you some of the calls that we've recorded on mystery shopping exercises, it would make your hair curl. I mean, it makes my hair curl, and that's saying something. You know, just the real horrific stuff whereby that fee inquiry is a million miles away from being dealt with in the right way. And that's just one little snapshot. But, you know, again, interesting how companies will invest in marketing, invest in social media activity, invest in branding and all sorts of things to get that phone call coming in from someone who's got that agent on their radar as being an agent they might use to sell their property, and then it goes no further because the human being doesn't deal with it in the right way. And that's where I think we need the balance between you know, tech and training, really, you know, those two things together.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, well, I couldn't agree with any more of that. And so I'm delighted to say today you've got a plan, haven't you? So this is helpful for people like my good self here. You've summarised what you feel is really a series of steps, best practice to help you out. And it's fair to say we're looking at this now in this, what are we, in the third lockdown period. But actually, this is just good. A lot of this is just great best practice anyway, isn't it, in terms of...
Entirely, yeah. I mean, again, obviously things are different in a lockdown scenario in the way certain things are done. That's completely understandable. But best practice is best practice. And what we've done, and we actually piloted this quietly in the first lockdown, just with a handful of selected clients, the concept of having this plan. And it's quite neat and tidy having this plan, because the plan is 4 things which begin with the letters PLAN. You know, life doesn't always work out as neatly and tidily as that sometimes, but the plan is PLAN, plan, and that helps agents remember what those 4 points are, and then obviously to put them into practice. So we did it under the radar. You know, there were a number of people came out in the first lockdown to tell agents how to run their business, and I sort of sat back and played a bit of a waiting game, because I thought, well, I haven't got a big enough ego to tell agents how to run their business in a pandemic, because actually I've never been in one, and yes, I've run an estate agency, was a partner of an award-winning estate agency for many years, but I hadn't worked in a pandemic, and I didn't have the ego to stand there or sit there and say this is what you should be doing. So I kind of spoke to clients quietly and kept my powder dry to an extent. But now I think we've learned lots of lessons, and thankfully the points that we covered in the plan, the very first version of the plan, I've had great feedback from our client firms who said, yeah, it got them through that very difficult period last year, and the things that they did then, they're still doing to make them successful now. So as ever, this plan has evolved, and it's valid for, you know, today, but no doubt it will evolve as the weeks and months go by, and it's something that, you know, agents can add to or tweak as they go. But yeah, 4 component parts: and they are protect,
Yep.
lead, assess, and new techniques and new practices. So protect, lead, assess, new techniques, new practice, PLAN. And that's basically what I wanted to talk about today, really, in kind of that order, you know.
Well, first things first, of course, as you said, on the ego point, don't worry, I've got that baton. I'll run with that. Quite happy to tell people how to run their business after having no experience myself. Secondly, it passes the Simon Whale test because I can remember plan. Sometimes you come up with these acronyms or whatever they're called, aren't they? And it's harder to remember the actual thing than it is to come up with it. But it's very simple, very concise. But obviously, we had a brief conversation about it beforehand, but this is the first time I'm hearing it, so if you don't mind me just quizzing you on a couple of the things, so let's kick off with a P then, shall we? Getting a big blockbusters there.
I was going to say, I'll have a P, please, Bob. Okay. So protect. What do we mean by protect? Well, there's a number of things you need to protect, obviously, and some of these are more obvious than others. But you've got to protect your existing stock. You've got to protect your sales pipeline. You've got to protect your customers and clients and your staff, of course, and you've got to protect, ultimately, dare I say, the NHS by doing certain things and having social responsibility. I think it's fair to say it's been really interesting seeing the probably furore, if that's not too strong a word, that's been created around that initial poll that was done late last week and tripping over into this week, that 67% of agents were against opening during the lockdown period. And
it was a massive poll as well, wasn't it? I mean, it was genuinely thousands of a few people said, as you said, it was about 2/3, 1/3. But a few wags, as they always are in the comments on Pi, sort of said, yeah, the 1/3 was the business owners, but everything else. But I thought that was really enlightening, and we are seeing a number of agents, aren't we, who are actually starting to mimic. Let's face it, we've had a great get out of jail card and have had a great run at this to be given a special dispensation. But actually, what you're starting to see now, I think, is a few agents matching and mirroring the public's reticence, concerns, health fears, let's be honest, to try and just say, look, for the moment, we're not doing anything.
I think it's shifted. I mean, I think there were an awful lot of people that were demanding a lockdown before the lockdown was announced. And I think that's very different to previous scenarios. And certainly on an anecdotal basis, I mean, I'm hearing every single day, literally every single day, more people that I know in my sphere of influence who've got COVID. And just yesterday, I was running the third day of a 3-day Stars of Tomorrow induction course. There were 10 delegates on that course on Zoom. The course started on Tuesday with 2 of them having COVID. And they soldiered on. And on the third day, I got an email from another member of the group who said, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to leave at 3 o'clock if that's okay. I've got to go and get tested. I had some hospital treatment on Monday, and the nurse that treated me has now been tested positive for COVID. So I've had a call from the hospital to go in and get tested. And that's just one little microcosm of 10 people. 3 of them, I think the test almost certainly was going to be positive because she was already starting to show a couple of symptoms. So friends, relatives, acquaintances, what have you. So it's a strange world out there. But bottom line is, I think there is a series of steps you can take to protect your business. Basecamp 1, speak to all your vendors and speak to them not just on the basis of just some sort of blasé chat. Just have a focused conversation about how they feel about lockdown, how they feel about their moving plans, what their intentions are. I think the goal here is to make sure that they see that you're on board with them, that you're still there. A lot of the public, I was talking to a couple of agents this morning, a lot of the public don't know that we're open as an industry. That it's not necessarily something, we obviously know that because we're involved in it, but a lot of the public don't know that. So just to get on the phone, talk to people in an empathetic way. How do they feel about it? How are the kids now they're back at home again, and all of that sort of stuff. On occasions, I know agents in 1 or 2 previous lockdowns have helped their vendors with maybe your delivery, or just to be part of the community and be seen as that community agent. But certainly to focus on your existing stock, make sure that they are still on board with you, make sure that they know you're on side with them, and try and probably to focus, if you can, on sifting them into 2 categories, and they would be the must moves and the might moves. And frankly, right now, what I would be doing would be absolutely focusing on the must move people, because there are still people there who are going to be saying, sod COVID, sod the pandemic, whatever else, we've got to move for whatever reason. And it's though you will have vendors, of course you'll have vendors on your books who are entirely committed, but you will have less committed vendors. And at the moment, they're probably bunkering down. You've got to check, of course, their attitude to viewings as well.
Yeah.
And explain to them your COVID procedures to put them at ease. Just, I think, keep that group of people. Without stock, we are nothing. You know, the first rule of estate agency is if you've got the right stock, the buyers and tenants will find you. And so that's base camp one. Obviously on sales, you know, sales is your forthcoming income. Your S2C pipeline is critical. And again, it only, you know, think about the public out there. It only takes one little whisper for somebody at work to be furloughed, or to hear that someone in another department's been made redundant, or there's a whisper of redundancies. It only takes one person to change their mind within a chain of four, and all four of that chain is kaput. So again, I think being all over your sales like a rash, micromanaging your sales pipeline, talking to solicitors, what are their protocols going to be during lockdown? You know, what is their manpower like? Are they business as usual? Are they working from home? Are they turning business away because they can't cope? You know, and making sure that obviously we've got the right solicitors doing the right things, agreeing deadlines with all parties, and pushing forward, because the last thing you need is a collapsing pipeline. And of course, one of the things from lockdown 1.0 I was quite interested and gratified to hear was that actually proportionately the amount of sales that collapsed was actually surprisingly small. Yeah, did you? I presume you heard that on a wider basis, did you?
Yeah, very much so. And as you said, I was stunned that it wasn't worse than it was actually.
Yeah, me too. I mean, if you'd asked me to put some money on it, I'd have gone. It would have been well above average. But you know, actually, people seem to sort of take it in their stride and deal with it, agents and customers and clients. So hopefully that'll happen this time. But I think certainly your stock, just make sure that they are genuine sales, that they're holding together, and that you're nursing them through. In terms of your staff, I mean, again, it was quite interesting going back to that survey. And you're absolutely right in what you say, that there were one or two observations that, oh, well, obviously the 67% are staff and the 29% are business owners. I don't think it's as cut and dried as that. I've certainly spoken to several business owners who feel uncomfortable about trading in lockdown, and I'm sure there's plenty of staff who are very happy that they're working and agree that they should be carrying on business as usual. So I don't think it was. I think those glib remarks were a little distasteful, if I'm honest. And also, but even if they're true, I think those business owners who are voting, saying, yeah, we're absolutely right to open and let's crack on, they do need to be mindful that possibly 67% of their staff might feel differently, and they need to be managed in a certain way. And that would be, you know, what concerns have they got about working? Do they feel safe? You know, are we genuinely? I hear some horror stories about lack of masks and lack of you know, some of the basic protocols out there. So I think if you're going to be moving forward successfully through lockdown and out the other end, you've got to keep your staff on board, and part of that is the kind of pastoral support that you give them, whether they're working from home, whether they're furloughed, whether they are in the office as normal. They need that support. And again, a number of business owners kind of forgot the furloughed staff in the first wave. They were obviously.
It led very much to a them and us kind of thing going on, didn't it? There was frustrations from the staff that were working, that there's the perception that there were some people sat at home doing nothing. There was the people who were sat at home saying, well, why wasn't I one of the chosen few to be back there? And it led to sometimes a bit of angst, didn't it? In many.
It did. It absolutely did. And I think, you know, from that perspective, as far as I know, there is absolutely no issue whatsoever. For example, with furloughed staff doing things like training. You know, for example, they're not allowed to work as such. But, and again, I don't want to turn this into some sort of you know, cheap advertorial, but there are training opportunities out there for furloughed staff, whether it be through the kerfuffle videos that are being launched in due course, or whether it be through whatever other mechanism you use. But they need to be kept motivated, they need to be kept focused. And I think, you know, daily meetings with staff is something that the best business owners are doing. Again, it might be on Zoom, it might be, you know, a mix of the two, but certainly daily team meetings to keep everyone involved. Those furloughed staff, yes, you know, I mean, again, somebody said, oh, they'll just sit at home and eat Wotsits and watch Netflix. Well, you know, in my experience, yeah, okay, maybe one or two of them will do that, but some of them are sitting there fretting about their future, worrying about paying their mortgage, you know, and all that, and how long this furlough issue is going to go on for, and, you know, whether they'll have a job at the end of it, and all of that sort of stuff. So I think we mustn't lose sight
It tells you a
And
lot,
also,
Julian, doesn't it? It tells you what those staff are doing as well, probably more than any other metrics. You know, when they're in the office, of course, they're all apparently busy. But as you just said there, yeah, if somebody's off watching Jeremy Kyle, if it was still on, you know, you kind of get that. Those people are asking if they could be doing anything. That's showing the commitment to the business and giving you a lot of clues there, isn't it? And I think
absolutely,
you're quite
yeah,
right
absolutely.
in terms of you've got choices really, because whenever we get back, those staff when they come back, they're either going to come back ring rusty, aren't they? Because they're literally going to, you know, been out of it for so long, it's going to take time to pick up rhythm, or they're going to be ring ready and have picked up some new skills and everything else, and just you know, helped out with the training to just improve their, you know, their self development.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, again, so there's things you could do with furloughed staff to keep them motivated and focused and develop. There's things you could do with the working from home guys, if that's what, you know, some of your staff are working from home at this particular stage. Again, obviously they need to be managed in a certain way, managed from a distance, but again, a daily team meeting, a minimum daily team meeting, I would suggest, with clear objectives. And a lot of it's about, you know, behaviours and practices, not necessarily results, but, you know, obviously things like how many calls they can make, can they do this, that, and the other. We'll come on to some of those ideas, but I think you've got to be very careful how you manage people. And I know somebody very well who got a job with an estate agent, lettings and property management department of the estate agent, and was employed on a certain basis. But within a week, things changed, and they changed the job role to him having to go and do 8 property inspections typically every single weekday, back to back, 5 days a week. Now he left that job, and he left that job partly because his role changed and it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. But actually, when it came down to it, he lives with his 88-year-old mother, and he felt that actually what he was being asked to do was just an absolute recipe for disaster. However careful he was, and however careful the tenants might be. Now, to me, you know, again, there's a management responsibility there. Is any landlord in the current scenario really going to mind if you phone them up and say, look, just to let you know, we're not going to be doing the inspection this month, we're going to leave it a few weeks, we have spoken to the tenant, everything's okay? You know, is any landlord going to say, well, I demand that you go and do an inspection? You know, I can't see that. So that member of staff felt jeopardized and walked. You know, they left. So that company has now lost an employee as a result of the way they manage it. Now, you know, people watching this might say that, you know, the staff should have just bitten the bullet and got on with it. That's up to you how you see that. But it's just an example of a scenario where I think, you know, we've got to be mindful that these staff are human beings. They've got issues themselves and concerns, and we've got to be careful about that.
Tell you what I've been amazed at, because I would have thought, in me doing my COD psychology, that people would double down and be really, really conservative and just be hugely thankful for having a job. Actually, talking to the recruiters, they really are taking stock at the moment and are quite happy to walk, you know, and really take. I suppose that's what something like this does, doesn't it? It says, is this really what I want to be doing? Is this the company that I want to be working with? And is essentially, is this the day-to-day stuff have you just highlighted I want to be undertaking?
I mean, it was well reported in the early stages of the first lockdown that you know, certain bigger companies managed their staff in a certain way, and others did things in a different way. And you know, no names, no pack drill. It's, you know, it's all well documented. But and I think that pays off in the longer term.
Yeah.
It was also interesting when we came out of lockdown and furloughed staff were invited back to work, because again, one of the things about again, we'll come on to this, but one of the things under the A stage of the plan, the assessment, is that this does give you an opportunity as a business owner to truly assess, when you get back to normal, who are your key players and why are they your key players. And what was interesting about that in previous lockdowns was a number of business owners were saying to me that if you'd asked them to create a pecking order of their most important staff prior to this whole COVID stuff going on, they would have had a certain list in their mind. And then after lockdown, that list was very different because of the attitude to work and the attitude to returning to work and all sorts of stuff related to that. And also who was essential to the business and, you know, the roles they performed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been quite an interesting development, I think.
Just on that essential point as well, is clearly we've bounced back, we've come back to a, you know, one of the best markets in years. Well, I don't know, I can't remember whether it was 5 or 10 years. But what's fascinating about that is everybody's been doing more with less, haven't they? By definition, I mean, if you've got furloughed staff, that means the other people, as you were talking about it there, the essential ones, have picked up the slack, and bloody hell, how have they delivered? Now, there is an argument that some of those might be burning themselves out a little bit, and that's a separate matter there, isn't it? But as you said, it really does give you and show you who the key players are, and I think that the old Pareto principle, isn't it? Focus on getting the stars, work with them, because actually they're the ones that will see your business, see your business.
Yeah. I think there was a degree of panic in the first lockdown, whereby it was like the world had come to an end and what the heck's going to happen. And funny enough, this company I was training these new starters for yesterday, of the 10 that were on the course yesterday, or over the last 3 days, 3 of them had been let go by a rival agent almost instantly in the first lockdown last year. And of course, that company that let them go then rapidly regretted doing so, because once we were allowed back to trade again in May, obviously the market took off, and they've had to frantically re-recruit. So, again, sometimes I think we take panic measures, and maybe we just need to think about those staff and the longer term in terms of how we manage them. So that's protecting the staff, protecting customers and clients. It's not for me to tell people what to do in terms of COVID procedures, et cetera, et cetera. They're all well documented. In fact, there's been quite an interesting article today on Property Industry Eye about government guidance. So that's pretty well reported. But I think it's important, as far as customers and clients are concerned, for you to make sure you broadcast to them what you are doing, and have make sure they know that you are COVID secure. Make sure they know that you're community minded and that you are socially responsible and all those sorts of things. Because I think you can win actually some business that way. I do think that if there are people say to me, oh yeah, but the other agents in town are still doing this, and they're not doing virtual viewings, they're just getting people around willy-nilly, etc. But there is an underlying message here that if you're taking social and corporate responsibility and the way you go about conducting your business, that can be a winner in the longer term. I think, particularly, God forbid, if evidence starts to come to the fore that a willy-nilly viewing from a sloppy agent ended with somebody getting COVID. That would be a disaster.
I've been boring our team to death with just saying, look, I can't believe they haven't found one yet. The likes of the tabloids, the Sun, and would like nothing more, would they? A state agent infects or kills a member of the public. They would have a field day, wouldn't they, with that? So,
I suspect the reality is it probably has happened. It just hasn't been, reported, or maybe they haven't joined the dots to back to that event. But I think there's certainly a worrying amount of stuff going on. I mean, I'll give you a flavour of that. Again, there's a town where somebody was saying that 21 agents in the town, and only 2 of them are doing virtual viewings. So, by definition, I assumed in my little home bunker here on my self-imposed long-term lockdown, I assumed that the world had moved on and that the vast majority of agents were doing virtual viewings, because it seems a very practical, easy measure to take to build that layer in. Because of course, again, we'll come on to new practices, but if there's agents tuning in to this not doing virtual viewings, I'd love to debate as to why you're not, because to me that's a protection for everybody involved, your clients, your customers, your staff, the whole shooting match. So
there's so many efficiencies to be gained, isn't there, as well, from this? I mean, we talk about the Aussies always laugh at our rather they feel antiquated private viewing system when they have famously open homes, all really efficiently done and everything else. Now we're in a different place anyway, but what this is doing is actually it's almost leapfrogging the efficiencies even of the actual open home, isn't it? And there's a lot to be said in terms of just the classic annoying things, no shows on viewings and everything else. We did calculators at my old company that showed how much a no-show cost. All the phone calls back into the office, back out to the obviously the applicants and everything else from there, and the time, energy, petrol. It's just that it's just there. So I think that seems to me that it should definitely. Well, I mean, if you're not doing it now, I can't see for one reason why you wouldn't be. And do come and talk to us, by the way. We've got a number of different providers on the kerfuffle website who are doing some really good stuff in this area. But also, I think just making the point, this is going to be one of those that is not binned, is it, when we come out of lockdown?
I think inevitably that when I remember. I'm old enough, sadly, to remember the '88 crash and the difficulty of the early '90s, and also obviously the '07, '08 challenges, because I was a partner then of Thomas Morris, and we came through that storm. And what it does, you know, from a positive point of view, is it turns your mind makes you focus very closely on your business, and best practices that get you through those periods are inevitably best practices that will still absolutely help you fly when the market turns in your favor. So all of the stuff that agents have done during 2020 and early 2021 will be things I suspect they'll embrace. I'll give you another example of that, funny enough, I was just about to mention. And again, it's quite, I do allow myself a wry smile, because one of the bedrocks, I believe, of a great estate agency business is the ability to invest your time with the right people in the right situations. Again, as a man of a certain age, I recognise that time is your most precious commodity, and it's something you should invest rather than give to people. And unfortunately, we are in a business and an industry where there's an awful lot of time wasted. But you can control your time investment by qualifying people to a really high standard. And I've been banging on about this for years, and a lot of my clients have, you know, embraced ideas that I've trained them in over years, and seen the inevitable benefits. But it's just been interesting how that idea of fully qualifying your customers has suddenly, you know, shot up the agenda as a priority for lots and lots of agents. You know, again, when you look in social media chat rooms or forums or whatever, or on some of the trade press comments, etc., it's just like, you know, we're now fully qualifying our customers. Because, you know, I wouldn't be small-minded enough to say this, but I'm tempted to say, well, surely you should have been doing that for the last X amount of years, because that is best practice. You know, just because we're in a situation now, why would you not fully qualify people? Surely it's better to send one person round that can put their money where their mouth is, that buys the property because it's the right property. And isn't that a better job than throwing 20 people willy-nilly? You know, forgetting COVID, just in general terms, is that not better time management, better practice, etc., etc.? So of course, inevitably, the barometer I have as to one of the things that helps me fully understand what my clients' needs, what my clients' training needs are, is the way they're coming to me and saying, we need training on this, we need training on this. So they tell me, and applicant qualification, exceptional applicant qualification, is right up there, and it's probably the most in-demand subject that I'm training almost every day now. But it's not new. But it's new to a surprisingly and scarily big number of agents who haven't adopted those principles before.
And we talk about I think some of those videos, you're touching on these aspects, aren't you, that you've done for us?
Very much so.
So that's great. Yeah, excellent. I mean, and obviously it's no surprise there, is it? But relationship sales is one of the most powerful methodologies there is, isn't there? In terms of it, if one thing comes across, empathy is you know, breeds trust. And trust leads to, you know, to deals being done, doesn't it? Ultimately, at the end of the day.
I mean, it's, you know, I know it's real Janet and John stuff, Simon. But the fact is, if you suggest a course of action to a client or customer and they trust you, they will at the very least consider that course of action. If they don't trust you, then they'll just think you're saying something to them that suits your agenda rather than theirs. So, for example, you know, I think again, when I talk about full qualification of applicants, the need to speak to a financial advisor or some proof of funds from that buyer is right up the top of the list of priorities now. And you know, again, it probably always should have been, in my view, but it's suddenly become something that agents think, oh, but actually perhaps we ought to do this. And the reality is that if you say to an applicant, why don't I get my colleague John to give you a call and he can talk you through the, you know, the financial side of things, the financial elements of the move, the mortgages, etc., etc. If they trust you, they'll probably say yes. If they don't trust you, they're going to think, well, no, you're just trying to twist my arm to flog me a mortgage, and I'm not interested. So again, trust is right up there as a key issue.
And can I ask just a basic question actually about training overall in agencies? You'll be talking and doing digital sessions with many of these businesses. But when the agency owners want to actually train their own staff, what's the methodology there? Is role playing is quite often, it takes people outside of their comfort zone. But is that one of the most effective ways of doing this sort of stuff? Or
it depends on the training need. Without getting too sort of precious about purist training, it all starts with what the training need is and what you're trying to get them to be able to do that they currently don't do. So you look at their entry behaviour and what you want their exit behaviour to be, and that will inevitably be something along the lines of you'll be looking to influence, I guess in most cases, either their knowledge their skills or their attitude, or a blend of all three. That's what you're trying to do because if they're not, for example, qualifying applicants correctly, that could be down to knowledge because they don't know how to do it, and whatever. It could be down to skills that they kind of know what they should be getting, but they don't have the skills to do it. Or it could be attitude, which is, oh, actually, I can't be asked, or I don't really see the point, or I've got by so far without doing it, so what the heck. Or it could be a blend of all those three things. So the starting point is, where are they now? Where do I want to get to? And role play, actually, despite the fact that everyone sort of goes into it, not everyone, but lots of people go into a cold sweat when you say let's do a role play. My belief, and again, sorry to throw these sort of sound bites at you, but they're so ingrained in my DNA now. One of my favorite quotes is, the more you sweat in practice, the less you bleed in battle. So, in other words, what do the best sports people do? They practice. So in the heat of battle, they are absolutely on top of their game and getting the results they're looking for. So, yeah.
I thought that was a Prince Andrew quote there.
Yeah. I can't remember. It may well have been. May well have been here. Yeah,
so I think that's absolutely true. Like you say, I go into sort of spasms when I'm made to do role play. But I think that's personal development, isn't it? By definition, taking yourself out of your comfort zone is where is where you learn.
Yeah, I mean, going way back in the day when I learned to become a trainer, I had to role play running training sessions, and what I found personally was the first 2 minutes you're like, oh my god, I feel entirely uncomfortable, and there's a video camera and people watching me. But within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you're into autopilot. You're into that kind of, it feels as real as it can feel, and you relax into it. And my god, it's a great learning curve, because when you then watch yourself back or listen to yourself back or get feedback from people, that's how you learn. And let's be honest, a role play, back in the normal world, I used to coach a lot of valuers, and in physical terms, I still train them online, but I used to do it in physical terms. And we'd go around empty properties, and yeah, it wouldn't always go that well. They'd mess up, but hey ho, didn't matter. Didn't cost the company any money. They didn't lose a fee. They didn't lose an instruction. Far better to screw it up with me just coaching them, and then go out the next day and do a real one to the right standard and win the business. So yeah, role play is a part of the process, definitely.
And should those be, on the whole, the feedback you're giving, should they be? I've heard some people who say try and focus on the positive more than the negative, because I mean, you've obviously got to correct bad habits as they were there. But one of the things, I can't remember who it was I was talking to, but they were talking about actually get them to identify their own bad habits, and you pick up on the really positive things. So actually they don't mind then those role play sessions in future.
Yeah, I mean, the classic coach's question, of course, is how did you think that went? That's your starting point. A vast majority of individuals will come back with where it went wrong because they're not stupid and they're grown-ups, and they've already identified that they messed up a particular part of the role play or whatever. And of course, if they own it and admit to it themselves, and it's already on their radar, you can then talk about that and how you can turn it into a strength. So again, the classic management / coaching technique is the old praise sandwich, where you start with the positives and then you look at the constructive criticism and finish on the positive. That's pretty well worn as a technique, but it stands as the test of time. So yeah, I think you've always got to deliver any criticism embraced within positives, and they will always be positive. So that's protect. I mean, we're chucking a lot of stuff out there,
yeah, absolutely fantastic, Julian. So we've got plan, haven't we? So a really nice, easy to implement, although there's nothing intrinsically difficult in there, is there? But you do need to just have the regiment to sit down and make sure you follow it. That's the key to all of these things, isn't it? Turning them into habits, isn't it?
Well, I think the best things in life are simple, aren't they? Much like you and myself, Simon. But
it's got the name.
Yeah, we don't overcomplicate things at Marvelous Training Solutions. As I say, I think estate agents is a simple business. I think it's still inherently a people business. And the plan for Lockdown 3.0, protect, lead, assess, and new ideas. That's something that we would recommend. And obviously, in the confines of an event like this, or a meeting like this, conversation like this, it's difficult maybe to get everything across. And if anybody wants to have a conversation separately, obviously very, very happy to do so.
Absolutely great. Well, look, what a fantastic sort of structure you've given there, people, right at the start of the year. to do it. As we've said, great for lockdown there, but this can be implemented anytime, can't it? And carried out there. So I think that, well, to use your phrase, marvellous, obviously, absolutely fantastic feedback. Once again, I just want to say, obviously, very, very excited working with you, and I encourage everyone to get in contact and talk. Obviously, the great man himself is available for gigs, as I always talk about. He's the James Brown of training. You're still here in a Zoom form, aren't you? And as he said, and we've got the digital now, so there's no excuse at all, is there, Julian, for one of the others, obviously, to be able to have training for not just yourself these days, but all your staff. And that's what I think is most exciting about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We cover everything. So yeah, anybody that feels they have any training needs, we will be able to deliver some form of solution, without a doubt.
Fantastic. Well, as I said, absolutely great. Thanks very much for looking so resplendent today. Absolutely dust in there to be talking about. We'll look forward to some more of these over the coming weeks and months. Thank you, Julian.
Yeah, top man. Thanks for your time, Simon. Nice to see you. And yeah, just go for a dip in the sea and enjoy your afternoon.
Cheers, matey. Thank you.
Cheers.
That was Julian O'Dell, our man with a plan. Tune in next time, kerfufflers.